Okay, good evening. The time is 6 p.m. I'd like to call to order our Norwood City School District Committee meeting. Today is Tuesday, October the 10th. Mrs. Camphouse, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Atwood is absent. Ms. Ballard?
Present.
Mrs. Rarica?
Present.
Mr. Taylor?
Present.
Mrs. Cole?
Present. If you would please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, item 3 on the agenda is our adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Camphouse?
Ms. Ballard?
Yes.
Mrs. Rarica?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Yes. Item 4 on the agenda, this is our presentations, and we are going to start with 4.01. This is the Norwood Montessori School, and we have Principal Mrs. Therese Booth here with us. So, Ms. Booth, I'll turn it over to you. Could you turn your mic on for us, please? There we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. Good evening. I'm Therese Booth, and I'd like to begin by sharing that it continues to be both a privilege and honor to serve as principal of the Norwood Montessori School. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some important information regarding our growing school. Inspiring independence and self-motivation to build a foundation for lifelong learning is the mission of the Norwood Montessori School. Our school seeks to provide a nurturing, purposeful, peaceful, and well-prepared learning environment which inspires children to be citizens who better our school, our community, and the world. Last summer, our staff came together to share ideas about a mascot for our school. And with your approval, we are hopeful to present the Montessori Monarchs to our families and members of the Norwood community. We are continuing to grow. Last year, we had 50 students who were enrolled in preschool through grade 1. And this year, we have nearly doubled in size. Next year, in grades preschool through 3rd grade, we are projected to have 136 students attending, and by the year 2026-27, we will have grown to preschool through grade 5. There are 5 key components of Montessori classrooms, which include credentialed staff, multi-age students in pre-K and 1st and 2nd grade, hands-on materials, student choice, and self-pacing. Curriculum in a Montessori classroom follows the Ohio Learning Standards, including lessons in reading and writing, practical life, math and geometry, science and social studies, geography, and history. There is also special attention devoted to our outdoor garden space, where over 100 native plants to Cincinnati are watered and cared for by our students, staff, and parents. We are grateful for Robert Town, our school resource officer. He attended our elementary information night for an introduction to our parents, along with an opportunity to share some key safety highlights. Testing in preschool includes screeners conducted before the start of the school year, and students in kindergarten and grade 1 are measured for growth throughout the year through Ames Web Plus testing. The purpose of these benchmark assessments is to diagnose strengths and weaknesses in both reading and math, followed with ongoing progress monitoring. This fall, our 2nd grade students completed MAP testing to establish a baseline for comparison of future academic growth. Through careful examination of MAP scores, we are then able to focus some of our learning, which may include adjusting our interventions and enrichments accordingly. If you take a look at this next slide, we look at the performance in grades K and 1st through Ames Web Plus progress monitoring. We notice the cones indicate 3 levels. Green represents proficiency in Tier 1, yellow represents the additional support in need in Tier 2. And for students who are represented in red, they will receive more intensive interventions. We are looking forward to winter results, which are anticipated to show significant growth. This is my favorite slide, I will just say. We continue to utilize the PBIS system, Positive Behavioral Interventions and Support, at the Norwood Montessori School. The premise of the program is to create a safe, effective, and positive learning environment for every child by explicitly teaching behavioral expectations. Through modeling and practice, our Montessori students understand that it is the expectation for all students to take care of themselves, take care of all living things, and take care of their environment. Students are recognized for their PACS leadership each month through PA announcements, certificates, awards, and photographs for our front entrance wall display. The culture and energy of our growing school is very positive and super exciting. The students, staff, and parents of our school community are the reason why the Norwood Montessori School is such a special and unique place within the Norwood City School District. On May 10th, we kicked off the upcoming 23-24 school year with an outdoor parent meeting where parents were also given an opportunity to express their interest in becoming involved. We have a very strong parent-teacher organization with members who are invested in their child's education and committed to supporting our growing school family and community. Already, we have enjoyed some opportunities to bring families together, such as our recent VIP Donuts and Fruit event with grandparents and guardians. We are looking forward to some additional PTO upcoming events, including the Trunk or Treat event this Thursday, having dinner at Skyline on the 18th, followed by a family movie night on November 3rd. A canned food drive is included in this event as one of our commitments to service. In closing, please take a look at these beautiful faces of our Montessori kindergarten class of 2036. Thank you for inviting me to share this presentation, and at this time, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Booth?
How did you get them to sit still for that?
That-
great
Had them
They
wave
look
their
darling.
hands.
It was a challenge. We were grateful for, I believe, in this photo, all the eyes were open, so that was nice.
200 takes
2036.
later.
When do you guys do your career day?
So that's something that we are planning on moving forward with in the spring.
Okay.
And we already have a group of parents that are excited about that and want to help support that event.
That'd be awesome. If there's anything you need from us, let us know. This
They're
looks
having
amazing.
a trunk or treat this Thursday, and they need people to do trunks, and I can't. I think I have to be home with sick people.
Oh, no.
But I
What
had
time
other
is that
things
event?
too.
So we can advertise?
The trunk or treat
I
event,
think
I
it's
believe.
Thursday.
It's this Thursday from 6 to 7.
6 to 7, okay.
And then there's something after that. Oh, the Skyline thing.
The Skyline, it's a dine-in event. And then followed with that, we're really excited about November 3rd. We had a
Oh, that's the fall
family movie
conference.
night
This
last
Thursday.
year,
fall
very
conference
well
is Thursday.
attended, and a lot of positive energy, so that was something that the PTO wanted to make sure we kept on the schedule for this year. So come and join.
If you go to the Skyline thing, I'd say go early. I tried to go last time they had one, and it was crazy full. It was well attended.
Any other questions or comments for Ms. Booth? Looks super fun there.
Thank you.
I like the monarch.
Yeah.
I like the Monarchs, that's
Yeah.
How'd you decide?
We came together, we knew that we wanted to really fine-tune our mission statement. We thought that was important as a school, and then to have a mascot represent our school family and the culture that we want to continue to foster. And it came out the butterflies, and the monarch butterflies, and then we started doing some research. And then upon, with your approval, then we want to present it to our families to also seek their input and feedback.
I think Monarch sounds super awesome.
I love the part 2 in the mission statement, or when you guys talk about like all living things, and I really like that. I think that's cute when like they do the rising stars, and they talk about, the Montessori rising star always cares about living things, and I'm like, yeah, that's so sweet.
It's nice to be able to walk through the hallways and hear that language being used in each of our classrooms.
I wonder if there's a way to, I know it's not the right colors, but to incorporate the red and blue into the monarch coloring. So that way it would, because I know with each of our schools, like we got the Wildcats, like each school has its own mascot, but they still follow into the coloring for the district.
I like that.
I think
appreciate
the
that.
Wildcat actually wears a sweater because he's just black.
Well, sometimes they'll put them in
Or he
like
has
red
some
outline
red
on the
eyebrows or
shirts.
something.
With the white dots would carry over beautifully in with each building having kind of a way to tie into the
Tie it in.
district overall, like the other buildings do.
A blue and a red
Of
flower.
course, the
right
creatives
by it.
think of that.
Face painter, I'm like, do you want that butterfly to match the team, or do you want? But yeah, that could be really pretty. I love
I
the
like that
design idea.
too.
Anything else for Ms. Booth?
Keep up the good work.
All right.
Thank you, Ms. Booth. All right. Moving on in the agenda, we're still in section 4, so we have item 4.02. Sorry, this is our local school report card, and I will be turning it over to our Director of Curriculum, Mrs. Christina Chesson.
Thank you, President Cole. It is hard to follow the butterflies, though, just for the record. But I do have some great news as part of our report card. And I know that the board has the PowerPoint pulled up as well. As you know, the report card is divided into 6 components. We have achievement, progress, gap closing, graduation, early literacy, and a college, career, workforce, and military readiness component. So that is a newer component. It is not graded this year. It will be graded next year, and it replaces the prepared for success component of years past. So we will delve deeply into, well, not too deep, but into the components for the district and also for our school buildings. So let's start off with some good news. Here is our district report card overview. The district met the state standards as an overall rating, and that's new this year. We haven't had an overall rating in prior years. We've had ratings, the star rating system for all of the components before, but never an overall rating. It is a 1 through 5 star rating, so you'll see that theme carried out through each of the slides. But to meet the state standards is a great thing. That's a very good thing for our school district. And just to give you a picture of how it's rolled out, achievement and progress are the most important components from the state's perspective, and they're weighted. Everything's weighted a percentile. Achievement and progress is weighted at 28.6% for each of those components. Gap closing, graduation, and early literacy are rated at 14.266%, and all of that comes together to give you your overall star rating. So they use many calculations through the report card, but we'll try to stick with a high-level process throughout this thinking. If we move on to our next slide, I do want to also, this has some percentages in it, but I want to say, as we get started, our achievement with the 3-star rating this year is the same as last year. We received a 3-star last year. It's calculated differently this year, but we still did receive a 3-star again. Progress is also a 3-star rating this year. Gap closing, we actually were a 4-star last year, but we are a 3-star this year, still meeting state standards. And our graduation was a 2-star last year. It's gone to a 1-star, and we'll talk more about that. And then our early literacy was a 2-star rating, and we've improved to a 3-star rating. And it's reflected in all of our elementary schools, which I know will be pleasing. So let's delve a little deeper into what the schools look like at a glance. So this is also cause for celebration. So the high school has gone up in 3 of their component areas. So you can see the stars there, but just to give you a perspective, Achievement, progress, gap closing, all have gone up 1 star from last year to this year. And as I spoke just a second ago, graduation has been reduced to 1 star. But that's fantastic to go up a star in 3 different areas. If we look at Norwood Middle School, they stayed the same in achievement and progress as they were last year, but went up in gap closing. Also cause for praise and congratulations. Norwood U went up in 3 areas this year. They went up in achievement, they stayed the same in progress, they went up in gap closing, and they went up in early literacy. Sharpsburg also went up in 3 components. They went up in achievement to a 4-star rating. They did not go up in progress, went down in progress, and then they went up to a 5-star rating in gap closing, which we're thrilled about. And then they also went up in early literacy from a 2 to a 3. The Montessori is new to this arena, and we'll explain their rating for their gap closing, and we'll show you how it kind of the mathematics led the way versus kind of perhaps a practical application of it. So we'll explain that in just a little bit. Williams Avenue went up in 1 area. They stayed the same in achievement and progress with meeting state standards. They stayed the same in gap closing with a 5, which is great. And then they went up in early literacy. So let's start with the achievement component back to the district rating. I know sometimes people want to see, like, what's my school like? So that's why I flashed that up there to start. But if we go back to the achievement component, last year we did receive 3 stars. This year we received 3 stars, but it's calculated differently. So last year it was based on two kinds of data pieces, and this year it is solely based on performance index. So last year we have indicators. We have state testing from grades 3 to high school, and each of those grade levels have an indicator. And now this year for achievement, they're not using that indicator amount. They're only using the performance index amount, but it all plays a role. And what's important in the achievement component is that every little bit of just a slight increase will show itself. So that's a good thing. And it certainly showed itself for us. In all those 20 achievement areas that you see there, we increased our percentage of students that were proficiency or higher, which is what this indicates, proficiency or higher, in 13 of the 20 areas. So that's great. That's what we want to see. That's the trend we want to see, is keep improving, keep improving. And I would like to acknowledge, like, biology is back in their pre-COVID percentage at this time with over 80%. We also increased in U.S. history and algebra and biology by more than 10 to 15% in all 3 of those areas. And our 8th grade group increased in each one of those indicators. So that achievement data, that just shows which students, the percentage of students that were proficient or higher. So that's not used as part of the calculation, but that information does feed into what's called the performance index. So if I'm a student taking a test and I score proficient, then my calculations would go into that line that says proficient. So as you know, the achievement levels, they've always stayed the same. They run from limited, basic, proficient, advanced, and advanced plus. Those 2 top, I skipped accomplished. Accomplished, advanced, and advanced plus. Accomplished and advanced had a name change over the last decade or so, but nonetheless, they've stayed pretty much the same. So wherever I score as a student, my information is calculated into this table, and it's called the performance index. So if perhaps I score basic, you'll see me there. If I score advanced, you'll see me there as well. And advanced plus might be less familiar, but students who are choosing a test that's not choosing, but are accelerated to another test above their grade level, have the potential to score at that highest level. And you'll also notice untested. Those represent students that weren't able to come to school during the testing windows for whatever reason. Reasons don't matter in this process. It could be excused or unexcused, but it does play a role. So using those points received, it's calculated back up to the chart to see where we fell. And we fell in the meets state standards with 3 stars. If we go just quickly to see the trend, we're trending back up, which is where we want to be from our COVID, from the hardest part of the COVID pandemic time. The year of 2020, we're not supposed to pay too much attention to because it didn't represent all of our student scores. So we're trending upwards, and each of, as our columns grow taller, that's what we want to see, and we certainly want to see the top 3 columns represented, or top 4 columns rather, represented at a higher level. Let's take a look at our high school, and so you can see in a little bit more detail about how they fared. So they have the overall rating at the top, a 3.5. They certainly have a lot to be proud of growing in those areas. They, of course, don't have early literacy, so their calculations of how it comes together is a little bit different than the district, 33, 33, 33, and 16.667. It all works out to be about 100%. So we are pleased about their achievement growing and their gap closing growing. Those are 2 of the biggest areas that we think we wanted to draw your attention to, even though we'll look at all the components. For Norwood Middle School, they received a meet state standards, and again, they grew their performance index from up about 2 percentage points. They grew their gap closing, remained this, went from a 3 to a 4, so that's something to feel proud of again as well. But I like to see those stars at the top represent a 3 or above. That's always nice. If we go to Sharpsburg, they have a 4 this year, so that's really great work that's represented in all of their scores. And we kind of went over how their achievement grew from a 3 to a 4. Their gap closing grew from a 4 to a 5, and their early literacy grew from a 2 to a 3, and that's represented there. Norwood View Elementary, they're a 3.5 rating. They grew in a lot of areas, as I said earlier, a 2 to 3 in achievement, and it's represented there. Their progress remains the same as meeting state standards. Their gap closing moving from a 3 to a 4, and their early literacy 2 to a 3. Williams Avenue Elementary, a 3.5 rating for them as well. The same nice story. They kept their achievement strong, 3 score. They kept their progress monitoring. They kept their strongest gap closing. Even though they increased in gap closing, you can't get higher than a 5, so they actually grew it almost 14%, and so it still is a really strong score in the early literacy. And I think the trend that we're seeing with early literacy is really pleasing to the district, and it represents a great deal of hard work from all of our teachers and our staff and our administrators, but particularly all the work that we've done over the years in K-3 literacy, the letters training that you approved. We did that during COVID. We had the virtual meetings for 3 hours or 6 hours at a time. Really great work all around the science of reading, well before the state decided to mandate it. So you can start to see this trend of our early literacy programming being really solid and strong for our students, and it will just get better. If we look at the Montessori school, so as you know, the Montessori is young. Last year, they only had 23 students that would have counted for any of the calculations in this. So they don't have a 3rd grader, so they can't have achievement. They don't have a graduation. They don't have enough. They didn't have a pre and a post for the early literacy, so they weren't there yet either. They don't have a progress because that requires state testing. They don't have career and college readiness either, but if you go to gap closing, what's interesting about this measure is the only thing that they could be evaluated on is absenteeism for 23 students. So 23
goodness.
students generated some absentees. Our youngest learners sometimes get sick and get the sniffles and get colds, and excused or unexcused, it doesn't matter. Those 23 students, some of them missed a couple days, and some of them missed 10%. None of them missed at the severe level, which the state has a at-risk, moderate, and severe. None of them were at the severe level as an individual. They collectively were not at the severe level, but those 23 students generated a need for improvement with their attendance. So that is where this work doesn't match some of the protocols that the state has in place. And we did
Yeah,
write,
Christine, you may want to mention you did write a letter.
We did
to
write a letter.
ODE. You know, charter
Yeah.
schools, when they start, you have 3 years before they give you a report card. This is the first year of a school with 23 children.
And that one
And we
Yeah.
have a
overall
report
report
card. It's
Yeah.
quite bizarre.
So
Yeah,
they're-
that's not
their
fair
one
to
reading,
have to-
in theory, then is like for the overall district. Then it's hurting the overall district, right?
so their one rating causes, their absenteeism caused them to get a 1. So their attendance goes into the district. The 1, just that component will be fed into the districts, yes. But not the 1, but the scores.
So crazy.
We did express our
um,
concern,
yeah.
and we said, it's concerning, this is 23 students, it's one component. We would think you wouldn't have a trigger until you at least had a couple components going on.
Yeah.
We know they're coming, of course we know, we want to be evaluated on early literacy, we're doing good work there, but we at least need to have some students to be represented. So they said that they would give it thoughtful consideration was their response.
Oh, I'm sure.
That
they
means
will.
there will be no
there's-
change.
I felt really
Oh
good
my
about that for
goodness.
the moment.
I just wonder, like, the data nerd in me is like, okay, if we didn't have to factor in that 1 for attendance, like,
Yeah.
what would the overall?
Well, and,
Oh, for
but
the
that same
district?
thing
Yeah.
that we're talking about with this is the same thing with high school graduation
Yeah, I
that we
was
brought
gonna
up with the
ask.
resolution.
I was going to
is
ask if that.
If we have deferred students, they count against us for graduation rate.
Right.
If we have kids who need that service, we should provide that service, and we shouldn't be dinged for it. But it obviously affects us,
Us.
being, you know, a small graduating class. Those percentages weigh more than 1%. And folks don't understand how that math works. And it
Yeah.
definitely impacts, but I'm really hopeful that it goes forward. There's already a bill on the table that's coming, and then the resolution that we approved is actually going before the delegation in November.
Right.
So I'm hopeful that that will change, and
And now on
Right,
to the
and
next
it
thing,
just
right?
goes
but
to
people
show
are
that
complaining
this-
about graduation, and they
the
don't
state
actually
doesn't-
understand how the numbers
Numbers work.
work
and
at
that work
graduation.
that you and Brandon did on that. I mean, so important, especially for a small district like us. I mean, it just.
Well, one school that I talked to, they had 63 grads last year, and that they had 4 deferred students, and that impacted them so badly.
That's
so
like
badly.
close to 8%.
Yeah. And I mean, we
that's
lost
crazy.
7 one year, and we lost an entire letter grade, and folks just don't get that. So yeah, seeing
Yeah.
1 on gap, what gap are we supposed to close?
Yeah.
They're this big.
Yeah,
So, of course, when you have more data, it makes sense, but when you don't have very much data, it doesn't.
It doesn't make
It
sense.
doesn't hold up.
Yes,
So
so-
nonetheless, we still know, it's almost,
Yeah.
it's wonderful that we were able to hear from Mrs. Booth, all the good
Yes.
things that are going on. So you can
Yes.
say, like, we know what's going on in
Right.
our.
Same
Yes.
way.
And
It'll
I'm
be
so
coming,
glad
right,
to-
Miss Booth? That it's gonna boost us.
And Ms.
I'm
Booth,
so
you
glad
had
to-
talked about growing the Montessori, obviously, that's the goal. So if that grows, right now we're only up to 2nd grade, so we don't have state testing for that school yet. So, you know, obviously if we incorporate a 3rd grade group, we could start incorporating testing, so that would be a factor for us. So what's the next level? It, you know, it's like 1st, 2nd, is it 3rd, 4th, 5th, like together, or is it
So. yeah,
3rd by
for
itself?
Next year, this year we had the addition of 2nd grade. and
Right.
the 2nd graders are taking the math test this year.
Right.
Next year, the addition of 3rd grade, so those 1st through 3rd graders will be together.
Okay,
And then the following year, we'll have the addition of 4th grade. And
so
then
we're doing it 1 year at a
it's
time.
1 year at a time.
Okay,
I wanted to make
as
sure
we
that
grow the
were
class, we grow the grade.
intentional and deliberate about growing smart,
Okay.
growing not too fast.
Right.
So it is the intention, one grade level at a time.
Okay.
I just want to say, Christina, I'm so glad that you are explaining this exactly to us, because the public does come to us and says, why don't you have a better grade? And I'm like, let me tell you all about it.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm glad to explain it as well for just that reason.
Mhm.
Let's move on to now that we kind of saw the schools at a glance, let's go back to the district perspective and look at the progress component. So progress component, we made 3 stars this year. It includes all of this testing that we do except for 3rd grade. It is the value-added component. So this one's a bit tricky for us to explain now because the value-added data comes out in more detail, I think October 14th, so middle of this month. So after that time, I could probably explain it even in greater detail. But for tonight, it's based on a 2-year weighted average. So the growth is slow, or if something doesn't go quite right, it's slow as well. It will be moving on to a 3-year weighted average this year, so that it's about to change again. So so progress, value added and progress is a little bit tricky.
Could I ask a question
Uh-huh.
there? 3-year weighted average, will that pick up the COVID years?
It won't go back.
It
It'll
won't
just
go back.
forward. It'll
Okay.
be these two that we're talking about now,
And then next
and then
year's,
next
okay.
year. And then they'll keep dropping and adding and dropping and adding. That's a good question. So the progress component is based on 2 parts, the growth index and the effect size. So this is the district rating. So we won't go too much down in the weeds on this, but the growth index is the students' observed growth. So where the student ends up and where you expected them to end up, divided by the standard error. So the state has calculations in place that predict where I would end up as a 5th grader based on my 4th grade scores. So they use that to see like where I'm going to end up, and if I end up in that spot or better, that's okay. If I end up dropping back in the order, then it's not considered so great. So that's one component, and then the effect size. And the effect size is a little tricky to explain, but it's the magnitude of the growth that's large enough to prove that it's true. So
Wow.
ask me in a week and I'll tell you like the real nitty gritty, and then you'll be like, oh, I understand, these kids moved here. But in this progress, or in this progress component, value added component, it's all about evidence. Do we show evidence that students grew the way they were expected to grow? So with that in mind, this chart at a glance, the light gray means it's not a tested area for us, so that's fine. The green, the plethora of green there is a good thing. Also, the darker, almost, it's supposed to be like a navyish, grayish navy, but it looks a little blackish. That's good too. The red shows that it was below expected growth, and there's significant evidence for that. And the yellow is kind of that middle. There's only moderate evidence that it was slightly below expected growth. So when you see a lot of green, that's a good thing. And then when you see some red and some yellow, those would be areas that you should focus on. And you should say, like, okay, what are we going to do differently? Or what are we already starting to do differently in those particular grade levels, in that particular component? And all of that is something that teachers and administrators do all the time when they think about how is this group, as they travel along their experience, how are they faring each year? Are they growing at least a year's worth of growth? So that is what we hope. At least a year's worth of growth each year, and more. And the programs we have in place support that kind of approach to this work. So if we move on to gap closing.
So Christina, is this
Yeah.
saying then that we are better, so that we're better in mathematics than in ELA? Is that what this is showing?
So it's not better. It
It's-
is that whatever we predicted the
They're-
way
they're-
would be.
they're hitting that.
They're hitting that. Yep.
More so than they're hitting that with ELA.
Right. So it's like, progress is a little different than achievement. So yes, that is accurate. That you can say in certain grades in ELA, we did not hit where they expected us to hit based on our previous results.
And these are against standards set by the state.
Yes, but it is me as a 4th grader, where they expect me as a 4th grader to be in 5th grade based on my previous experiences and my previous scores. So they do some calculations and they say, well, Christina Chesson should score here in 5th grade. And if I score there or better, that's good. That's a green.
That's a green for you.
That's a gray. If I don't score quite as well, if I don't keep my order in line, then that would be a yellow
Okay.
or a red.
And they is the state.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Okay, so on to gap closing. So gap closing, there are now 8 measures in gap closing, and it's about how are we meeting the performance expectations for each of this. So it's, let's just move forward. Here's the STAR system, and this is how they rate the gap closing component. So that's always good. It's just a reference. But if we move on to the components, 2 of the components are in achievement, ELA achievement and math achievement. The dots will indicate where the goal is for that group of students, and it's based on all the subgroups. So this is, if you have more than 15 in a subgroup, they count as a group. That number used to be much larger. It
Used to be 30.
30, then it was 25, and now it's 15. So if you have 15 students that took an ELA achievement test, they will give them a target. And these targets move each year, and the goal from the state is to grow it as close as they can get to, it used to be 100, and they've reduced it a bit to 95.6. But each of these different groups have their own targets based on perhaps where they started with their gap closing work. So some students, as we know, if perhaps you're learning English as a second or third language, maybe English language arts would be a little harder for you. So your goal might be different than if you were a different subgroup. We represent all the subgroups except for Asian Pacific Islander, and then Alaskan Native, and American Indian. So those are the subgroups we don't represent. Everything else is covered, and what everyone likes to poke at a bit is that all students are also a subgroup. So mathematicians disagree with that. They don't believe that all should be a subgroup. Nonetheless, these are not our rules. So the dots are up there to show the goals. If the bar goes over the goal, then that's great. We've met the goal for this year. The goal will keep growing, as I said earlier. So achievement in ELA and math, English language arts and math, are 2 parts. 2 more parts are the growth in those 2 areas, ELA and math. Another part is graduation. So just like we have an overarching graduation, it has its own component. It's also involved in gap closing. So they look at each of the subgroups and they show where they believe those subgroups should be as they work towards growing. And how we fare. And English learners or multilingual learners, they have their own dot as well. Now their component is based on a different test completely. It's based on what's called the OELPA. It's the English language test. So students each year who are English learners from another country that are learning English as a second or third language are given another state test called the OELPA to test their English, how much they've learned English. And last year we met this. We were well above it. And some of those students exited. But then we have new students, and they might be our youngest learners where it was hard for them, our youngest learners where it's easy for them, some high school students where it's hard or easy. Everyone's path is really different in this. So we work with the students. We try to grow them so that they learn English language, and then they exit our program, and then you won't see their scores here anymore. But this represents 1 year's worth of data for us. And although it might feel disappointing, it represents the work of those students learning another language. Chronic absenteeism, here it comes up in the gap closing. So it didn't used to be part of the components, but it is now. It's an all or nothing. You can get 0 points for chronic absenteeism or 5. And based on our chronic absenteeism, it is an area we struggle with and have struggled with over the years and continue to struggle with past COVID. The outright goal for the district or for the whole state is 20%. We're well above that. But with that in mind, now they're going to just ask us each year to reduce it by 3 until we can just so we're heading in the right direction. So reducing it by 3% means that reduce the number of students that miss more than 10% of school each year. That's what chronic absenteeism is. It can be excused or unexcused, and I think that's important to know because it doesn't matter the reason. But we do believe as a district that if students are not feeling well and are sick, they should stay home and get better. And when we're well, we want you to be here every day that you're well. We really believe in that.
How do they use that as a fair component anyway? Because you could have a kid maybe medically necessary who is keeping up with their work at home, because I've got kiddos that are at Children's who keep up with their work. And so it doesn't necessarily reflect that student's ability to learn or progress outside of the classroom setting.
So sometimes we get penalized for that, and sometimes we can write a waiver or acknowledge the work. So if they're hospitalized and are part of a program, we can get credit for those days.
Okay.
Even though it's not like a full 6-hour day, we get some credit for that.
Okay.
So that we probably wouldn't be penalized. It takes a lot of work to make sure all the ducks are in a row, and so we do it right. But they do understand that, and they are considered when they go to those classes at Children's or someone comes and does the tutoring, we are given credit for that.
Okay.
Yeah. But it does sometimes takes a while to get to Children's, and
Yeah.
those absences, as they wait, sometimes they come with us.
Do tardies factor into that too? Is it like they get so many tardies and that's a missed day or?
Yes. I hadn't thought about
Ah.
that. Yes, they do. I believe they do.
They
double
do,
check that. They
because
do.
it's hours, yes,
Yeah,
they,
it's all,
it's
yeah.
factored
I
in.
hadn't really given that much thought, but they certainly
Mhm.
do. Thanks, Mrs. Ronan.
Yeah.
So the gifted indicator, last year we did a little bit better on this one. So this is an all or nothing indicator, but it does have 3 components. So the value added rating, we did receive a star, but if you don't receive the number of stars they want you to receive, it's a 0. The performance index, all of our gifted kids that take the achievement test, their performance index collectively is 113.7. The goal for this year for the gifted students was 116 collectively. So we were off, and so we didn't make that indicator or that index. So
What
that's
the
a
heck?
0. And then the gifted identification and services. So this one we take to heart because we do believe that once we identify students, we should serve them. And if we look closely at our data, which I'm always happy to provide, we do a great job of K to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8. We do a really great job of matching. If you're identified, we're serving you. Now, when you get to the high school, sometimes as they get to be an 11th grader or 12th grader, and they've taken care of their courses, and they've already had an honors class, they've had AP classes, they might choose something different that's a passion for them. They've met their credits, they've done their hard work, and if they don't, say I'm gifted in science as a senior, and I'm not taking honors physics, I just, or say math, say I want to do something a little different, or computer science course in math. I might choose something that doesn't fall within a way for us to serve you properly. But we work really hard on that. Students that go to Scarlet, they also have choice. And sometimes when they go to Scarlet, based on their program, they run out of room so they can't do an honors course. And so just that least little bit made us not get that indicator. But I feel good about our work. I feel good about the level of detail we document it. We just have to keep chipping away at it, and we will. And I feel good about the services. Most importantly, quite frankly, the services. If we move on to graduation component, we received 1 star for graduation, and I know this carries a lot of emotion with our group for sure, and we've been talking about graduation for years, and perhaps it's going to see its day this year.
Oh, I hope so.
So we did receive 1 star, and let's look closely at this. Graduation is based on the 4-year and 5-year cohorts combined, and 4 years count as 60% of the credit, and 5 years count as 40% of the credit. And those two combined gave us our weighted graduation rate, which was 81.8. And I think I had it. Oh, it must be on a different slide. So that's our graduation component. If you look back on this chart, I think this chart is interesting because anything less than 84% is 1. We're at 81.8. But look at, then you go from 84 to 90, they'll give you 2 stars. So this is graduation. So if I'm at 90, I'm only getting 2 stars. 90 to 93.5, 3 stars. So they're kind of growing really slowly. They're going to make, it's hard to achieve 5 stars for this. And it is challenging for us. So here is our work, similar districts' work in the state. It's an area we are working on, and we're working really hard to help students with this. If you ask me the million-dollar question about what percentage of students deferred this year, 2.4 of the 4-year graduation rate of students deferred. I don't have the 5-year deferred group on this. 14.6 of those that didn't graduate were still regularly enrolled with us. And I should pause real quick to say, just as a reminder, this is not 2023, but rather 2022. So this is not last year's graduation group. Graduation is always a year and behind. So this is the class of 2022. That's why they have a 4-year and then a 5-year graduation for them. 82.9% of the students who didn't graduate with us are no longer enrolled. So when you enter high school, you have 4 years to finish that work. And if you don't finish it within those 4 years, you aren't part of the graduation rate. You are a non-graduate. So what if in my sophomore year, I decide to move to Kentucky, but I don't really tell you where I went exactly, and you try to figure out where I went, and you can't find me in Kentucky? Well, that's a non-graduate because we don't know where they went. And in the tri-state area, that's more plausible than what you might think, because people do move to Kentucky and go out of state, and it's harder for us to track them unless the parent says, I want to check in, we're here, da da da, and that doesn't always happen perfectly. We do have some students that choose to drop out when they're 18, unfortunately, and we still keep working with that, but we have a group of students that leave us and we don't know where they went to a different part of the state or a different state altogether because they haven't checked in. And then we have students that deferred. So for us, being a small district, every percentage, every student really matters for this graduation component. Of course, they just matter because they're our students, but they matter in this graduation component.
So this is pre and post-COVID numbers being averaged, so folks can kind of get an idea. It says 2017 and 2018 respectively, so this is going back a ways.
Yes, so they started in the fall of 2018 for this cohort.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, 4 years. Okay, early literacy. So this was where we grew really well in this. Early literacy is based on 3 different areas. Proficiency in the 3rd grade reading, so if I score a proficient or above, promotion to 4th grade. So if I don't score a proficient or above, there are still a couple ways I can get promoted to 4th grade with alternative assessments we can use. So that's what that number represents. And then improving K-3 literacy. So that score is based on the chart right below that. So of the students that in kindergarten were off track, if we move them to on track, then that's a good thing. It's a fall to fall score. So if I enter as a kindergartner and I am given a test that the district uses for diagnostics, then if I'm still here and I go to 1st grade, we're going to test you again. And if I was off track as kindergartner but get on track as a 1st grader, then we get credit for that. It is always a fall to fall score for that early literacy component. And that's where I think we're showing our movement and our growth.
Christina, does mobility in a district impact that because you're looking at K to 3 over a 4-year period?
Yes, so we do. If you have to be there in both the kindergarten to 1st grade, 1st grade to 2nd grade, 2nd grade to 3rd grade, to be a part of the cohort, fall to fall. So it's not just if you were there all year. If you were there all year and moved, then you can't be part of that cohort anymore.
What
You're
if we
somewhere else.
switch elementary schools? If you have someone move from
So-
one building to the other, does that affect it, even if you're still in district?
It counts for the district then. You're
Okay.
still with us. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know some people have moved from one side to the other and
Mhm,
switched schools.
Yeah. Yeah, it would still count for the district, so that's a good thing. The last component is the college career workforce and military readiness component, also referred to as prepared for success. It's a name change and a calculation change. So this one is interesting too. So this is based on the number of students in the 4-year graduation cohort that demonstrated their readiness for secondary experiences. So it's that number divided by the number of students in that 4-year cohort, all the students they thought should still be there that were there as freshmen and should be there as seniors, and that is the percentage we get. So here's how it's evaluated. So these are the areas that you would get a point for. Every student counts as 1, and if I'm a student that gets 2 of those, I still just count as 1. So if I receive an honors diploma and I have that ACT score, I still just count as 1. So you can see most of our points come from honors diplomas. We have an ACT and remediation free. You'll see that bar. Industry recognized credentialing is something that people are working really hard to help students through that process for the student's sake, and then also we can count that as something that they're ready for the post-secondary experience. And then if you receive an AP score of 3 or better for 9 credits, you can be counted for that. And the ones listed at the bottom aren't things that the that this previous class of 2022 had any part of. But that will grow too as we talk more about pre-apprenticeships or apprenticeships and things like that. That will grow as well. This does include our Scarlet students. So
That's what I was wondering, why aren't those on there? With
They
the
are
higher
on
means
there.
jobs?
so we,
And the technical assessments, because they have to have those to graduate for us. at
yes.
Oak.
So right now, with the students that should have graduated in 2022, they did not achieve that based on the reporting from Scarlet to the state. So we are working through that now to make sure that credit is given to in the right places, because that's really important. You can tell like all this is a great deal of tracking, and then we upload it into the state system. So we're working. We can't affect change on this group. This week we can affect change only on the class of 2023, so our most recent graduates. But this is where we were with the previous group. So this isn't evaluated yet, but it's healthy to see where we are so that when we do double that, you'll be very proud, which we know will happen next year. So you might be wondering, well, what are the next steps? So we have great things in place. I will say that. We will continue our district and building leadership team meetings that we have and their direction that they're giving to the building and the district. We have teacher-based teams. See the lights come on when we talk about
I
next
was
steps.
waving my arms away, trying to get them to go.
Our teacher-based teams work really well where they kind of get down to the nuts and bolts about how students are performing on assessments. We'll continue to use all of our assessments that we have that are aligned to state standards, because we know by aligning them to state standards, our students are more well-prepared to tackle those problems. We'll continue our professional learning around the science of reading. It's crucial for our work. It has been, and it will continue to be. This year is an ELA adoption for K to 12, so we're looking forward to that. And we know that that's a lot of work, but it's good, healthy work. And we also are really excited that the state's going to provide some funding source, so that will be something that the district has to cover. So that should be a good thing once we know more about that. We will use a graduation team to support the data collection. It's a benefit to being small, because we can look at each student and see how their path is faring and come in and talk about that good work. We created an absentee platform over the summer. It was really May through the summer. And so we're just using it now to see how it supports a faster intervention process for our families and our students, and getting to the reason for absences, if it's beyond I was sick, if there's a different kind of challenge we need to support the family and students with. We will continue all of our content area professional learning, and then all of this good work, we know that through monitoring it, we will improve, and we've been paying close attention to it. The teachers are really detail oriented, and so are the administrators in each of the buildings, looking at how kids are doing every step of the way. So we just have to keep doing what we're doing now so that we can get credit for the good work that people are doing throughout the year. So what kind of questions did that bring forward for any of you?
So the number 26 says we have 26 kids that graduated last year, basically, that are ready for college, correct? I mean,
Not ready for something
post-secondary, after
based
college.
on this bar
Do
graph.
we know? Do we have a number of like how many are actually in?
Oh, in college?
And like post-sec, like something.
For sure. We do a survey now. We started last year where we have a person slated at the high school that reaches out, finds their email address before they graduate.
Okay.
What's your personal email? Because I'm going to ask you a couple questions. They talk to them in the fall, like where are you going to school, what career have you chosen, or what other program are you a part of? They ask a series of questions, and that helps us track what they're doing. I do want to say, like, perhaps I'm a student who didn't get an honors diploma. I'm a solid student. I'm a really solid student. But I didn't get an honors diploma. I didn't get an ACT score, and I didn't take AP courses, but I did well in my classes. I just didn't get an honors diploma. Unless we do something like industry recognized credentials, you might not see me there. But I still did my work. I still graduated. I did my seals, but I'm just not hitting the mark. And so that's why we said we better make sure that we're doing enough to get credit for the students, and also do some programming that might help them prepare for the next thing. But
Why don't they have college acceptance letter on there? Because like, if you have military enlistment, which I'm pretty sure I remember a couple kids
Right.
standing up
We've
last
got
year
nothing
saying that
there.
they
What
had
the
accepted.
remember,
military
this is
enlistment.
2 years ago.
Well, even still,
Yeah.
I feel like
There's
I
some
remember
every
students
year.
standing every year saying we're going into a military program. At least 3 on average that I've seen every year since I've been on the board. We have kids every year that do military. And like I said, with Oaks, I've seen these kids come out and I know we're doing their readiness seal. So I'm going to follow up with that
All right.
tomorrow night. I'm going to be like, hey guys,
I
we're
like
not
it.
reporting this. This is not okay. But
We
how
need more
come I
detectives.
get honors diploma, but if you're if you've received an acceptance letter to a college, you might not be that honor student. You might not be, an industry
Right, I know
approved apprentice
Landon wasn't
program.
an honor student.
But
He's in college.
but he had a college acceptance.
Yeah.
So that to me says college readiness. And if we have college career or, even just saying I have a job, like, are you already working?
Right, yeah.
If we actually call this a workforce readiness and you're already working, then to me, you're ready to work.
Looks like I need to write another letter.
We need to write another letter because
That they'll give thoughtful consideration.
consideration.
it just doesn't
No.
reflect truly to how they are
Agree.
saying we should be reflecting these kids. And if you're going into a career, an apprenticeship isn't the only way to do it.
Right.
A CTE isn't the only way to do it. College isn't the only way to do it.
Right.
But they need to be reflected there if that's a measurement that they want us to actively use.
It's really a great idea. I kind of said it jokingly, but I will write a letter because it's not formally created yet. So maybe there is time to intervene.
I'd be
and
happy to
say,
help with that.
Okay.
Because this is
Really
not okay. And I'm like, if you want us to nitpick on how kids need to be counted, I will pick this apart and tell you there are many
All right.
ways to get there.
Right.
And this is
And
not
it's
it.
not fair that we're not counted for any of these things when we know kids who are doing those
Yeah.
things.
I mean,
Like
I've
Landon-
also got
Landon was in the
career.
fire program, and there's.
Yeah.
I
You
think-
got a job.
Right. Well, he
Those
offered
kids-
a job. He was offered a job before he went to college.
Right, that's what
So,
I
I
mean.
mean,
Our
he
kids,
was-
when they walk across the stage, 90% of them or more already
Right.
had jobs, and
Right.
even more had one waiting for them as soon as they walked across the stage. So when we have 20, and we've got Career X kids, special needs kids, who go into career programs and apprenticeships, and are they being counted? Like, it's just there are more components to this that are missing.
Yeah,
This
20
is not ready yet for
Right, I
them
like
to
this,
be
like,
weighing
the,
it.
The 26. I like. So this is 2 years ago.
Yeah.
2022. Yep.
So,
Yeah.
how close is that number? Is it? I don't know. We're at 22.6%. Is it higher than? Is it in reality? Is it higher or?
It
is that
has
what
to
they're
be.
just saying on number. They're just saying it on
It
numbers.
has to be.
So that counts against us in the overall scoring, right?
Well, I would say both of these numbers are inaccurate. I would say this 26 is inaccurate, and I would say this
The
115.
115.
Well, 115 was accurate based on the original number. Remember, because if you move, it doesn't get reported.
It doesn't.
If you, like, if that graduation number is based on your freshman count, if you had 115 kiddos and maybe, 10 of them
If you
move and don't
though,
tell.
they'll add you to it.
If
So
you come
I
in.
came as
If
a
you
10th grader, and I
So
I
everyone
started
who
school
moves
somewhere
away
else as a
gets
freshman
counted.
in 2018, they'll add me to it.
So they'll add to us,
But
Yes,
they won't
I
but they
remove.
won't
But
take
they won't
away.
subtract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that
What in
number
the
may or
world?
may not reflect an actual graduation number overall.
Yeah.
So details are important, as you can see. So
Yeah.
this is important to get right. And Amanda and I have worked on this for a while, just making sure that every box that needs to be checked is checked and going back to the right people.
Yeah,
to
but they're
ask
not
the
giving us all the
questions.
boxes.
Well,
Yeah, I think that's an important thing. I don't mind writing a letter about that.
and thank you for doing that because
Yeah.
that's, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool that they're
oh,
including all of
sorry.
these seals and proficiencies and apprenticeships and all of those opportunities, but they're forgetting that kids who don't meet these things also get offered college
They
opportunities.
do.
And, there are other programs out there,
Right, 'cause-
especially, like I said, Career X and similar programs
But
for special needs kids.
22.6% counts against our overall.
Yeah.
well, and not that, Christina, you couldn't figure this out without my, input here, but I mean, maybe we could give some examples and show like a few numbers. So for example, the military enlistment, maybe we could say, hey, we know that, three students went into the military, or, had received an acceptance letter or commitment or whatever for the military. That would have brought this number up to 29, and that would have made this kind bit of difference in a small school like us. You know, where we have on average 100 graduates. I mean, that's a huge.
It is huge.
Yep.
I
Well,
was just
luckily,
gonna say,
we just created that apprenticeship thing, too. That's going to help.
yes, increase, because now when we look at the state standards or the state guidelines for college or for graduation requirements, so now we're doing away with like the 18 points on the end of course exams, which this class could choose both pathways. So now as we move into like where we're focusing more on the apprenticeship piece, earning the 2 seals, which military enlistment is one of those seals, this will lend more into us being able to really track those students because the graduation requirements have changed. And so it feeds more naturally into those conversations that we're having with our students. So I think we will see an increase in this just because of the makeup of how the graduation requirements are now laid out. So I just wanted to add that piece to that.
It's just frustrating on
Yeah.
our end when people come at us with how bad our scores are.
I understand.
And I'm like, guys, do you understand what we're being graded against? And we're not even being given all the pieces to the puzzle. It's not, it's very frustrating for us.
They're telling us they want us to do things, we do them, and then they're like, oh, no, not for this silly reason, you get 0 on that. Like, all right, thanks.
It's like they're just making it up.
If this was, if this
Right.
graph was true accurate, what would the, you know, what would
Yeah,
the,
if this
what would the
graph-
number, what would the, what
Yeah.
would it look like? Would it bump it up to a 4, 3.5?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What, I mean,
So
where would it
next
really
year, when it is a component graded, then we hope that our industry credentialing is in the 70s, based on what we know about the class that just graduated, how many students were already with that, and then we're double checking everything else right now too, to see about the class of 2023.
Because without counting Scarlet, I mean, you go to Scarlet, unless you just didn't go to school, you're ready for something.
Something.
Yes.
And they've got 0 of those
there's
people
0.
on
We,
there.
we've really emphasized the expansion of SEALs and industry credentialing and even apprenticeships. It may not even be called an apprenticeship, but most of our kiddos do away work at a place. So if you want to call it an apprenticeship, great. It could just be that's their job. But to me, I'm like, if you're working out in the field, you're an apprentice at that level, and they should get credited as such. Like I said, just all the credentialing criteria just aren't there. And so that makes it not fair for us to be able to gauge this.
Well, I appreciate your comments.
And our passion
And
of
your
being
passion,
mad at this
as
stuff.
always. So thank you for giving me the time to go through our report card. I appreciate that. And I know the schools are already quickly, once we get the results, they just move on and they just start like using the results to see how they can do it better. So they are in mid-flight right now with all the improvements that they've made based on when we first saw our report card. We didn't need to see the report card once we saw our test scores, and people started tracking right away and figuring out what the next moves are. So thank you.
Thank you for all your hard work
Yeah.
on this.
Thank you. Both of you. I know you
Yes.
teamed up on a lot of these things. Thank you.
We did. And I have been using this as a notepad.
5.
I lost my words. Here we go. 5.
Yes, superintendent recommendation.
Item 5, personnel superintendent recommendations, and I will turn the floor over to Superintendent Mrs. Roman.
Thank you, Madam President. 5.01 under employment. Item number 1, we have some supplemental contracts for teachers who are doing some extra work with students, as you can see, either in sports or in drama or musical. Number 2, we want to welcome several new aides for our special education classrooms. Item 3, those are the mentors for our new teachers. It's a number of our veteran teachers volunteer to be teacher mentors. Number 4, obviously, we're hiring some more avenues for success staff. Number 5 is a change in status. That's our preschool itinerant teacher. We have some additional needs, and she volunteered to work some additional time for us. Number 5 is a correction from an assistant site supervisor to the site supervisor for item 5. Item 6, as you can see, we are gearing up for winter sports and also our plays. And we have our staff who volunteered in those positions. Also as a club advisor and avenues for success. And then in 5.02, we do have 2 terminations during probationary period, either due to state licensure or attendance. And thank you. That concludes my report.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent Roman. Item 6, this is our Education Committee, and I will turn the floor over to Mrs. Rarica.
Thank you, Madam President. We have first a memorandum of understanding with Talbot House, where we just say that we are working with them. And then also we have our field trips, the high school going to Monty Incorporated, Children's Theater, first 3 different plays for Williams Avenue, going to Scarlet Oaks for the middle school, and Sharpsburg Elementary is going to Green Acres. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Rarica. Item 7, Policy Committee, and I will turn it over to Vice President Taylor.
Madam President, next week we will have our second reading of BDDG, which regards how we do minutes and how we make available minutes to the board and the public. EHA and EHAR regards how we just data records and retention, and how do we dispose of records. JED regards student absences and excuses and reflects changes based on specific to COVID. That is it.
Okay. So we will have our second reading next
Thursday.
week on Thursday and approve those, I'm assuming. All right, item 8, this is the Building and Grounds Committee, and I will turn it over to Ms. Ballard.
Thank you, Madam President. There are 2 requests listed. The first is for Norwood Recreation for middle school, Williams View, and Sharpsburg gyms for practices and games. This will be a typical schedule from years past. The schedule is listed there. The second request is from Dunn Community High School. They would like to use this Shea Stadium for a football game on Saturday, 10/28, 5:30 to 9:30. Maintenance will be working that event alongside athletic staff, and they will be covering that cost. That concludes my report.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ballard. Number 9, this is our Finance Committee report, and I will turn it over to our treasurer, Mrs. Camphouse.
Thank you, Madam President. 9.01, the financial reports and change order listings are attached for your review. The only change order listing left is for the high school. If we have change orders for the roof project, the boiler project, or either of Shea Stadium's projects, I will follow the same protocol for approvals and will summarize it in another spreadsheet for your review at board meetings. 9.02, permanent appropriations and 412 certificate, our budget for the current year. 9.03, then and now purchase orders, just a couple of purchase orders needing further approval. 9.04, rebid advertisement for Shea. The bid advertisement approved September 21st had to be redone. The only thing that changed is the date of the advertisement and the date of the bid opening, which is now scheduled for October 17th at 2 p.m. The bid advertisement will be effective September 25th. Next week, you will approve the bid advertisement and you will be approving the results of the bid opening on the agenda. 9.05, PNC banking contract. I've made some changes to our bank services to tighten internal controls. This is a 5-year contract with PNC. 9.06, waive school fines for COVID years. To waive student fines for missing Chromebooks and library books that accumulated during the year's shutdown and the time of virtual in-person learning from the 1920, 2021, and 21-22 school years. We continue to tighten our processes so that we have less risk and asset controls. In addition, we'll continue to recover these Chromebooks. All other years' collections efforts will continue for the fine or the return of the actual Chromebook. 9.07, purchase of a dump truck. This is for the purchase of a small dump truck to replace our very old truck. Our old truck has electrical issues, a slow oil leak, a fuel pressure leak, and when using the lift, the engine sometimes quits. In addition, I can't help but laugh when I say that. In addition, there is a lot of serious rust that could be a safety issue. We have collected quotes from 3 vendors and looked at 6 different trucks before agreeing on this lowest quote to Paul Sherry Dodge. 9.08, resolution to declare transportation impractical. This is an updated resolution to include additional private and charter schools that are impractical for us to transport to. 9.09, certificate of substantial completion for the high school. We've been working to complete the outstanding change orders for the high school project, and therefore we are ready to authorize the certificate of substantial completion. This document defines the date the warranties start for the equipment installed in our high school project, and it also completes the building permit process. That is everything that I have for finance tonight.
Thank you,
I
Mrs.
like the dump truck part.
Yes.
I didn't know we already had a dump truck, except for that it says old dump.
Did you look at the picture?
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
The Scarlett's Automotive
And I was like,
Program. They
oh,
could
that
work on
could be mistaken for a regular truck.
They've
It's-
given
I'm
us
sure
just
I've seen
engines
it before, I just didn't realize it was a dump truck.
It's small. We use it for all the landscaping, of course, and it's very small, but it's in really rough shape.
Sounds like it. If the engine stops.
Good to know that, so that people don't think we're buying a huge dump truck.
Are they
If
taking
ever
it as
saw
a
it, they
trade?
would wonder how it still runs. That's for sure.
Are they working in as like a trade-in value
Yes,
amount?
we're getting $1,500 for it.
Oh,
That's more than I
For
would
its
have thought.
value?
Probably.
We're paying them. They're paying us to take it away.
yes, okay. All right, item 10, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
All motion?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned. It is 7:12. Thank you.